All right. Well, welcome to 2015. It feels weird, doesn't it? 2015. I always can't, you have to write the date. It takes me forever to get the year right. It's about halfway through the year, and I'm still putting 14 or 13. Or the other day, I wrote 1999 on something. I have no idea where I've been from, So, hey, welcome. It's good to be back. I'm looking forward to the year. It's going to be full of awesome things, a lot of fun things, good stuff. The hard thing, though, is we also know that life's going to be full of a lot of hard things this year. Right? I mean, it just kind of comes with the territory. And you go, well, I don't know, I didn't sign up for that part. And sure enough, we didn't. But somehow it invites itself into our lives, and then we have to deal with that stuff. But there's also going to be a lot of great stuff, a lot of fun things, a lot of places where God meets us. There's going to be things where God is going to bless us. And then there's also that hard stuff. So it's going to be a normal year, just so you know. But one of the things that's not going to be normal, at least early in the year here, is, and I just want to bring you up to speed on kind of where we're at as a church, on becoming, we're a church already, so it's not like that, is something that's in question. Or maybe it is, you never know. Yeah, like, really? Is that what we're doing here? So we're kind of a church. But we've been associated with the Evangelical Free Church of America, and we've been kind of a church plant under their umbrella. And eventually you can become a formal part of the denomination when you have certain things in place. And the things you have to have in place are things we've been working on in the last 6 months. And they're kind of coming to fruition. They're not coming together quite as pretty as I had hoped. So hang with us and work with it. But here's kind of the deal. You have to get a membership. So we did a membership class. And I think we had 87 of you go through that and say, I want to be a member. Now, some of you couldn't make it then, so we have a class coming on this Thursday. But we thought initially it was going to be just enough people that would fit in my living room, and we could do it there. But unfortunately, or maybe really fortunately, it's more than my house can handle. And so we're going to move it to a place, and so we needed to find a place. And so I have been to almost every gathering place here in West County to ask if we could use their facility. And all of them said, absolutely, sure, let me look at the books. Oh, I'm bummer, sorry. We're full. So I only have one last place that's still trying to figure out if they can squeeze us in. But here's what I'm going to do. That class will happen on Thursday night, 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. It will happen somewhere. And we'll post it on our website, and we'll try to post it as soon as possible, maybe even later today. If not, it'll be posted tomorrow, but it will happen. So if you want to still go through that class, and if you miss all the classes, no big deal. We'll do another class somewhere down the road. It just won't be this initial group, so don't worry about it. And then we've been going for the last 6 months. We've been meeting to establish, hopefully, that initial group of elders that will help lead, guide, protect the spiritual integrity of this church. And so we started with about 15 or 16. We've kind of whittled it down. I think the Lord has whittled it down to 6 or 7. And we'll be getting their names, information, pictures out to you so that you can see that whole thing. And then to become a part of the denomination, we needed to come up with a constitution and bylaws. That's kind of part of the deal. I kind of wish we'd have been a church in the first century. I don't think they had to do this, bylaws, and because they didn't have a government that was asking them to make sure all these things are in place. But we have to do it, and so we have been wrestling with that, and it's been harder than I had expected, and we've really wrestled with it and worked hard at it, and in fact, we wanted to have those done a week ago so that we could have those in your hands, so for 2 weeks you could look at it, because we want to ratify that thing, but we've been really, not struggling, I think making it better. So that'll be posted on our website too early this week, so you can see it. And that's just so you know, what's going to happen next week on Sunday is it'll be not a normal Sunday. What we're going to do is kind of install, if you will, membership. Now, if you're not going to be a member, that's no big deal. Please come back. We're still going to worship the Lord together, but we'll install the membership from those 2 classes. We'll also try to then install those elders, kind of not crown them. It's not, kind of crown them like this. Boom. It'll be more of that rather than this. And we'll not crown them. I don't know what you do with elders. You install them. And then we're also going to say, hey, let's go with this constitution. So we'll try to get all that out there. So this is not exactly how we had wanted it to happen, but I think it'll still be reasonable. And we'll get all that out to you. And then the following week, we'll just kind of go back to normal and do it the way we've been doing it, except for with the elders and membership in place. It'll really be different. It'll be kind of cool. So we're looking forward to it. So that's kind of where we're at as a church. In your lives, so that'll change a little bit of our church, but our lives are all going to be full of all sorts of good stuff and hard stuff this coming year. And as a result of life like that, sometimes we have questions. And so we've started to, we wanted to start 2015 with a series called Ask Anything and Everything, and we've given you the opportunity to ask questions. That opportunity is not over. You can keep asking the questions, write them down, give them to us, because they're really important. And really, asking questions, I think, really is you kind of go, asking questions, is that wrong? And I don't know where that came from, where we began to, in the church, say, well, it's not good to ask questions. Or sometimes we've even said it's not good to have doubts. Because the reality, I think, is this, that doubts are simply stepping stones to a stronger faith. Asking questions, I think, is really wisdom. It's wise to ask questions, right? As a football coach, it was always when a player would make a mistake on a play, and I'd say, well, what were you thinking? And he'd say, well, I didn't know what to do. And I'd say, well, why didn't you ask? Ask the question. Well, I didn't want to look dumb in front of my players, And I'm thinking, okay, now you really look dumb in front of your coach because you didn't know what to do and you didn't ask and you made a mistake, and I need you to ask the question. We really ask of our kids, too. Hey, ask questions. Because asking questions is wisdom, because there are some really important questions for us to ask. For example, like this. Why do we drive on a parkway and park on a driveway? I mean, that's a great question, don't you think? There are some really key questions. Or what about this one? If nothing sticks to Teflon, then how does Teflon stick to the pan? You ever thought about it? It's a good question. They're really important. Or, is it wrong for a vegetarian to eat animal crackers? It's an important question. There's a couple more. Why are there interstate highways in Hawaii? That doesn't make any sense. Or how about this one? When a cow laughs, does milk come out of its nose? There are some more important questions some of you have asked, like this one. Can salvation be lost? Can we stray so far that God lets us go? Well, that's a good question. One of you asked that. Another of you asked this question. So what's the Bible say concerning same-sex marriage, and why? Why? It's a huge issue in our culture, right? And so we're going to have to answer that question. Another question some of you had was this. Does prayer actually make a difference in what God does or doesn't do? It's a complicated one. Not easy. But there's got to be an answer, at least an effort. How about this one? What's up with the Trinity? How can God be one and three? Can someone explain that to me? Great question. And that'll be covered on one of the weeks that I'm gone. And so that'll be good. No, I'm just kidding. How about this one? How scientifically credible is the theory of creation? Great question. Or someone else asked the question almost like it, is how scientifically credible is the theory of evolution? And so maybe we'll touch on those. Here's another one. What does the Bible say about dinosaurs? Are there dinosaurs in the Bible? That was asked by one of the kids down in Kid Connection. It's a valid question. It's fair. Or how about this one? What's the deal when it comes to the person who has never heard of Christ or the gospel? I was just talking with a friend of mine who just spent 2 weeks in Albania, and they were teaching English as a second language and using the Bible to do it. And the pastor, who had never been to Albania before, was shocked when his class of 15 that 14 of them had never heard the name of Jesus. Wow. He didn't know what to do. He was like, what do I do with that? And what happens when it comes to that? So we're going to ask all sorts of questions. We're going to try to address those. But it seems to me, and this is what I'd like to cover today, is when we ask a question, we are fundamentally on the inside saying, give me an answer that does something. And I want to cover this morning, kind of as an introduction. Give me an answer that, first of all, satisfies my head and my heart. Give me an answer that satisfies that, or at least tries to satisfy that. Look at this in Luke chapter 10. This is a situation where Jesus was being confronted by the religious leaders of his day, And this lawyer or a scribe, kind of a friend of the Pharisees, he says this, "And behold, a lawyer stood up and put him to the test," speaking of Jesus, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" And he said to him, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" And he answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your strength and with all of your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." It goes on to say, "You've answered correctly. Do that and you'll live." Now, here's the observation I want to make. Let's just circle them real quickly. Here's the reality. Jesus understood that we were integrated people, that we weren't disintegrated people. That he says, "I want you to love with all of your heart, soul, strength, and mind." That it goes together. And so if we're going to address the heart, we have to address the mind because we're holistic people. Our heads and our hearts and our souls and our strength, it's all tied together. We can't just separate all that stuff. And so you have to give an integrated answer that satisfies both the head and the heart. Because Jesus is asking us to love him with the whole thing, with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our strength, and even with all of our mind. That our brain, our mind, our thinking is a critical part of being a human being. And it has to be integrated into the whole thing that we would love him with our whole self, the whole deal. And so that's the kind of answer we want to give, one that satisfies the whole person, an integrated person, your whole experience. That's one of the things that's probably happened in the fall, or the fall of mankind, the sin of mankind, is we became disintegrated people. We separated parts of ourselves from the other parts. And we somehow divorced ourselves in that way. We were intended to be whole people, together, integrated in ourselves. And so we'll try to give you an answer that satisfies both your head and your heart. We'll give it that the good old college try. The second thing we're going to do this is, and we'll spend a little bit of time on this, is somehow this answer needs to be grounded in truth. It has to be grounded in something, and it's got to be grounded in truth. Look at this in chapter 18 of the Gospel of John. Jesus has been arrested. He is going through the mockery of a series of trials, and one of those trials happens briefly in the home of the Roman leader Pontius Pilate. And it says here, "So Pilate entered into his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, 'So, are you king of the Jews?' And Jesus answered, 'Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?'" So he's really saying, "Pilate, do you really care? Is this something you've been thinking about? Is this something you wonder about? Or is this just something others have said to you and you're kind of speaking on their behalf, trying to figure out what in the world to do with me?" Is really what he's saying. And then in verse 35, Pilate answered and he says, it's basically this, "I don't know. Am I a Jew?" He said, "I'm not a Jew. I'm not into this. Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" He doesn't know. He's not suggesting that he's king of the Jews. He's just hearing that that's the accusation. They're saying, no, he's not. He's saying, "Hey, I'm not a Jew trying to figure this thing out. What, are you kidding me? I'm just trying to keep the peace, if you will." And Jesus answered and he said this, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not of this world." Can you imagine being Pontius Pilate then? He didn't ask for this problem. It came to him. He's the Roman leader. And he's saying, "I don't know if you're king of the Jews or not, but let me ask you, are you?" And then he'll try to do something with that. And then he gives you this answer that's like, what do I do with that? You say your kingdom's not of this world. Well, I'm sure that he had no idea what to do with this answer. And Jesus is saying, if it was of this world, I would call my friends, my disciples, these people who follow me, I would call them to insurrection, and they would do it. But he knew it wasn't of this world. There was something bigger going on. Now, look in verse 37. And Pilate said to him, "So you are a king. You say you have a kingdom. May not be of this world, but you say you're a king." And Jesus answered and he said, "You say that I am a king." And then he brings it really to the point. "For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness of the truth." Okay, let's circle it. Just make it a big deal out of it. This is why Jesus came. He came to save to seek and to save the lost, right? He came to do all sorts of things. But he came to bear witness of the truth, to live it out, to be it, to present truth. And then it goes on and he says, and let's circle it, everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. Wow, that's pretty incredible. Everyone who listens to the truth, or everyone who is of the truth, listens to my voice. Wow. And then look at this. This is the existential statement of the universe. Pilate said to him, what is truth? It's a question we've been asking ever since. We've been asking it all along. What is truth? It's the great existential question. It's the great question of philosophy that they've been struggling with. That what is truth? So let's just go there just for a second. Let me give you a few thoughts. Of our day, probably this word, though we never talk about it, probably hasn't come up in casual conversation recently for you, is epistemology. And it's really the theory of knowledge. And it's really that area of philosophy who's trying to struggle with how do we know what is and what isn't? Well, how do we have knowledge of knowing what is actually and what is simply opinion? And how do you know the difference and how do they interact? Probably a secondary thing, a subset of epistemology is the theory of truth, determining what is true versus what is not true. Now, sometimes you feel like, oh, it just feels silly, doesn't it? You know, but you can't even believe how many books have been written on this. From the beginning of time, as people have struggled with how do we determine what is true. Let me give you just a few thoughts. In modern day philosophical thought, there are others, but these have been kind of the main ones in recent years of how we determine what is true. First of all is what's called the correspondence theory. And this says that truth is that which corresponds with the way the world actually is. Makes some sense that true is, it's got to fit. You know, if I say, hey, I am a 13-year-old girl, you'd say, well, you can think that if you want to, but it doesn't fit reality, right? You want to fit things into reality. I could say all sorts of things that don't fit reality, but in the correspondence theory, it's got to correspond to the things around it in an appropriate way so that it fits reality. Makes sense, doesn't it? Now, what created that reality? This theory doesn't relate to that. So when you leave God out of the picture, you have to come up with some sort of explanation. And you just say truth is that which corresponds with the things around it appropriately. Okay, the second one is the coherence theory. And this says that truth are those things that cohere with our other justified beliefs. So it's saying, it's very similar to the last one, but this one just simply says it has to be at least consistent with the other things that I believe. Whether they're true or not, it just needs to fit. It needs to have a system to it, which makes sense. Truth's got to fit into a bigger picture, right? Whether it's true or not, or whether it's real or not, at least it needs to be coherent and cohere. Now, the next one is this, and this is probably where we live a lot of the times, is truth is the pragmatic theory, meaning that truth is that which works for us and meets our needs better than the alternatives. The problem is this becomes very personal, and it becomes very much like what happened in the book of Judges, when the theme of Judges is that man did what was right in his own eyes. Now, if you chose something else that was right in your eyes, and we had a conflict, then we just have to say, well, whatever. I'll do what I want, you do what you want. Let's hope it doesn't cause each other too much trouble. Or if it does, then might makes right. I will beat you. I will win. That's really what the Romans did. When Pilate was asking, so what is truth? He had learned in the Roman Empire that might makes right. The strongest is the truth. And Jesus was saying something very different. Now, not too many philosophers will suggest this fourth area or theory of truth, but I think it's one that we have to put in there, is the divine or the theistic command theory, is what some would refer to it as. And here's what it looks like, is that truth is that which is grounded in the character and the creative/sustaining nature of God. That the starting point is the fact that there is a God, and that truth is grounded in who he is. And truth is grounded in both his creative nature and in his sustaining nature of life. And from that comes any correspondence or coherence or even pragmatic things. It comes from the nature of who he is. Okay? Now, let's look at this. In John chapter 8, Jesus said this. So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, "If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Well, isn't that an incredible thought? The incredible thought is that the truth of who he is sets us free. Wow, that's a beautiful thought. If we're going to give an answer that's based in truth, it's got to be an answer that sets us towards real freedom. Now let's look in this passage. Look, truth here is really based on or connected to knowledge. The truth comes from knowing what is true. Now, it's important to know that this particular Greek word for truth, there are a couple of different words. One is oida, which means kind of a understanding of truth. Another Greek word for knowing here is gnosko. And gnosko means an experiential connection with truth. And so what he's saying here is that the truth that sets us free is an experience of truth that is so grounded in it that it's not just an external mind thing, it's an internal engagement with the truth. It's an experience of his truth. Now look at this. That's connected with, right before it, is connected with the fact that we abide in his word. That his word is the truth that we engage experientially, in reality, in real life. And then as a result of that, we entered into this truth that sets us free. So engaging him in his truth is really important. You guys, look at this. In fact, remember, you've all heard this one a million times. John 14:6. "For I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me." He is identifying himself in his person as the truth. Wow, you just think about that for a second. That all of the truth of the universe is contained in the person of Jesus. Now, I can get that philosophically. I have a really hard time getting my arms around that personally, because I could never come close to suggesting that I embody truth. I mean, that would be ludicrous. But in Jesus Christ, he says, "I am the truth," the whole thing. Wow, that's an incredible thought. Look at this one in John 16. Jesus said in verse 12, "I have many things to say to you." This is when he is preparing to leave them. "I have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. But the Spirit of truth, when the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all the truth." Circle it. That he will guide you into all the truth, for he will not speak of his own authority, but whatever he hears, he will speak, and he will declare to you the things that are to come. That all truth that the Spirit will bring. Wow. You see, our answers need to be couched in truth. Because it is in the embodiment of who God is to tell the truth. The whole truth. And nothing but the truth. So help himself. Right? Because he's committed to truth. And so our answers will not only hopefully satisfy your head and your heart, but it is going to be grounded in truth because it's an important part of this whole deal. Okay? All right. Now, third thing that I hope that our answers will do is it will not miss involving grace. One of my favorite quotes is this one from Francis Schaeffer from the book, The God Who Is There. He says, "Nothing is more ugly than Christian orthodoxy, truth, without understanding and without compassion." Have you ever gotten an answer that okay, I know that's true, but man, the way you delivered it just was harsh. It hurt. It felt like a knife. It felt like you attacked me. And that we want to give answers that not only are truth, but are full of grace also. In fact, look at this. Gospel of John, first chapter, verse 14 says, "And the Word became flesh," speaking of Jesus here, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory as the only Son of the Father. And look what he was full of. Circle it. Full of grace and truth. So if it was important for Jesus to live out his life at every point, integrated perfectly, not just with truth. You just think about it. If God were to come to our world and all he exercised was truth, I don't know where that would leave us, but I don't think it's pretty. It would be very hard. It would probably be harsh. It would leave us all in a world of hurt, right? But Jesus came and perfectly integrated in everything that he did with every person that he ever interacted with on every issue. He integrated grace and truth perfectly because he was a God all about grace. We've just been talking about in Galatians for how long? The issue of grace. God's riches at Christ's expense, the fact that God would sacrifice for your good and for mine out of his own cost. He would take on himself our sin, our pain, our hurt, our wrong, all that stuff, and he would pay it himself to change our lives, to radically change us out of his grace. And if Jesus came to be full of grace and truth, then we ought to too. So the answers that we'll give hopefully will satisfy your head and your heart. We hopefully will be grounded in truth, but we also want to be full of grace. Now, the last one that we want to do this is it admits that we may not understand as much as we wish. Okay? We'll want to admit that we may not get it all. You know, I think there are really three barriers in our lives to experiencing satisfaction with the questions we ask. First of all, intellectual. There are intellectual problems. We need to address those, but we got to acknowledge we're not all knowing. We're not all smart. We're not all, we're all smart, but we're not maybe as smart as we would like to be. We don't get it all. You know what? Sometimes we just miss with stuff. So there's a problem. And if we're going to give an answer that satisfies the head, we got to recognize that we may fall short of that. So there are intellectual problems. There are also moral problems that get in the way of us really engaging it. Sometimes I don't want to understand because morally I can't afford it. And I think we live in a world that sometimes we morally can't afford to engage the gospel because it would radically touch a part of life that we're afraid for it to touch. So the issues here is that sometimes we may not get it all because there are moral problems in that. The last one is this, is it may be a willful problem. If you read the life of Oscar Wilde, he is an English playwright who lived much of his life in Paris and lived an incredibly decadent life. Would say at the end of his life that he was willfully unwilling to give his life to God because it would cost him a lifestyle, a morality that he was unwilling to change. He knew that God was real, but he could not say yes to him because of his willfulness of his own soul and because of the immorality in his own life. And so, as we try to admit that we may not understand the whole thing, there are things that will come in the way, and we get that. So let me wrap it up this morning just with a few thoughts. Let's go back to our questions. First of all, why do we drive in a parkway and park in a driveway? Just so you know, there's a good answer for that, because originally a parkway referred to the refurbishing of the city's green space. And then we built roads through those places, and we very unimaginatively referred to them as parkways. And so now we drive on parkways. And the reality is that driveways have always been referred to as a way of getting from the house to the main road. And over the years in suburbia America, those roads have become very short, and they're called now driveways that we simply park in. So it makes total sense, doesn't it? All right, how about the question of this one? If nothing sticks to Teflon, then how does Teflon stick to the pan? And just so you know, the answer is far too complicated. But I would encourage you to Google it, because there's a real answer out there, and it's very scientific, and it's very good. And there are a variety of ways to make it happen. And some are better than others, because you've probably had a Teflon pan. The Teflon came off after a while, right? Yeah, and there are some that it sticks on much better. So go Google it. You'll get a good answer. Is it wrong for a vegetarian to eat animal crackers? Well, I don't honestly know, but I doubt it. I bet it's fine, but I don't really honestly know. All right, how about this one? Why are there interstate highways in Hawaii? It's a great question. There's a good answer. In the 1950s, our national road system, the projects, the interstate system was really designed to provide not just for the good of the populace, but it was designed to be able to transport military across our nation quickly and efficiently. And there are a lot of military places in Hawaii, especially on the island of Oahu, where all the interstates are there, and to get military people back and forth as quickly as possible. So it fell within the acts of Congress of doing the interstate system that they included Hawaii. So that's why we can have interstates. Guys, do you love coming to church or what? Okay, key question. When a cow laughs, does milk come out its nose? Well, obviously the question is yes. But it does depend on the color of the cow and what kind of milk you get out of that cow, right? Brown cows give chocolate milk. And as soon as we find a red heifer, we're going to have strawberry milk, and that whole thing. So, but here's the deal. On January 18th, so next week we're going to be special about kind of establishing as a church. But the following week, here's the deal. We're going to talk about what's the deal with creation. Is it important to my understanding of God and man? Now, you don't have to believe in creation to be a Christian. But was there something about the beginning of the story that helps us understand the bigger story and how it fits? That's what we're going to do on the 18th. And then on January 25th, we'll be talking about, does prayer actually make a difference in what God does or doesn't do? And some of you go, well, I don't know, who cares? But maybe it really matters. Maybe there's an answer. And we'll talk about those things. So maybe it'll make a difference on understanding in 2 weeks from now, who you are as a person. And the following is, who is God and how does he react, how does he interact with you in this dimension of prayer? But in all of this, we want to make sure we do this, that it satisfies your head and your heart, or at least try, that it's grounded in the truth, that it does not miss involving grace, and it admits that we may not understand everything about life. But in the midst of that, God will meet us in the midst of our questions. He will meet us in the midst of our struggles and our hurts and our wonderments and all the things that we do in life. And so in 2015, that's what I'm looking forward to, is a God meeting us right where we're at and meeting you right where you're at. So here's what I'd like to finish with as the band comes up. What I'd like to do is ask you, where does God need to meet you this year? Where do you need God to meet you this year? What is the stuff going on, the questions you have about life, about day in and day out, about family, about hurts, about whatever it is you're going through? Where do you need God to meet you? What questions and struggles do you have? Do you say, God, if you could meet me here, I sure would appreciate it. So I want you to spend just a few minutes talking about, hey, God, I want you to meet me in a place where it can satisfy who I am as a person in my head and my heart, that it's about truth. I want to experience your grace. And I'll admit that I don't get it all, but God, I need to get you. So could we just spend a minute in the quietness of this place, kind of taking this year, 2015, and laying it out before him, and who you are as a person, and letting him meet you right where you're at. So take just a moment between you and the Lord, right where you're at.